the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
For 2024, and one of the names on the list, Arian Smith. When you saw that, Matt Green, and based on what you saw at G-Day, and when you think about where the pecking order is right now for Georgia's wide receiver room, are you buying? Because I feel like the last 3 off seasons, it's been kind of like Arian Smith coming out party, and this is the year Arian Smith breaks out. Like, are you still falling into that line of thinking, or are you kind of like, I don't know if I can still just put him in as a breakout candidate based on what we've seen through the first couple of years here?
I mean, I guess it depends on what do we call a breakout for Arian Smith. Like, I mean, this guy's got like 20 career catches. So he averages like 30 yards a catch. So he's come into some big game, like outside of that Ohio State game where he's got like 120 something yards and a touchdown. Like he really hasn't had many big games. Like he's good for a 50-yard catch here and there. I don't know. It's hard to. We were just talking about the receiver room, so it's not like it's a bunch of proven commodities, but it feels like he's behind like almost all of those names that I mentioned. Like he feels like the perfect like 5th or 6th weapon. Like if that's what he's going to be for Georgia, like that's really dangerous because he's maybe the fastest player in college football just in terms of straight line speed, and that's what he does. When they bring him in there, they throw it to him deep, and he's caught a bunch of deep balls and some in some big games. So I don't know. It's hard for me to see with a guy like Dominic Lovett, he's going to get a lot of catches. A guy like Dylan Bell is going to be a huge part of this offense this year. We haven't even mentioned the tight ends really with Oscar Delp. I think he'll be a good tight end, but he's just not going to be Brock Bowers. I think there's a lot of good playmakers on this team that Arian Smith is kind of a cherry on top. So I don't even know if I can, and obviously the injuries, you can't really ignore the injuries. Like I don't want to ridicule the kid for getting injured a bunch, but it's, you just can't, after a while, you're talking about Jacob deGrom in the major leagues. Like, yeah, it's cool how good you are, but we know you're not going to pitch a full season, and we have to recalibrate for that. And Arian Smith has kind of proven to this point that he can't stay healthy. Some of that could be bad luck. These things happen, but if Georgia gets production from Arian Smith, I think it's going to be like a cherry on top type of production that it's going to make them that much deeper. I don't see any scenario where he's like the 2nd or 3rd leading receiver on this team.
Interesting. If he's to flip it, if he is one of the breakout guys for them, does that mean Georgia's having a good year, or does that mean things went awry for a lot of the guys that they were expecting to count on, and that means Georgia's passing game's actually not been what was expected coming into the year?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Like, could he have his Isaiah McKenzie season where McKenzie actually led? He was actually Georgia's true number 1 option, even though he's like a return specialist.
Yeah,
it's probably not a good thing if he's leading us in receiving. But I don't know. I guess he's got the ability to be a guy who takes the top off of defense. So it's hard to see it being a bad thing if Arian Smith is one of Georgia's go-to guys in the offense, because you are losing a couple of go-to guys in Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey. So maybe it's a scenario of a bunch of injuries. Like that's like worst case scenario that he's still around because of a bunch of injuries or something like that. But they just seem too deep for him for it to be a bad thing if he does have this breakout year where he's got 40, 50 catches and 8, 9 touchdowns. Like it's hard to see that as a bad thing in any way. I can't put that on him. I think if he's got 15, 20 catches and a couple 50-yard bombs, like that's kind of the best thing you can expect from Arian Smith. But if I'm putting a breakout player like on this national list from Georgia, it's Jalen Walker defensively 100%. I'm the head of the Jalen Walker fan club. Like this man should have played more than he did. He's a disruptor off the edge, and that's something that Georgia lacked a year ago. He's an inside linebacker like by trade, but I think he's just too good of an athlete. Kind of like when Channing Tindall was at Georgia as the 3rd linebacker. He was so good at blitzing. You played all 3 of those guys at the same time. So I think Jalen Walker is just a ridiculous athlete and a disruptive player of the backfield that you have to get on the field.
Interesting.
The other thing to watch for too, the last thing I'll say about Georgia is Michael Williams is moving like to outside linebacker. So, we'll see. He always kind of reminded me more of a Trayvon Walker, kind of that hybrid, just really good athlete. But Trayvon Walker was on the defensive line with his hand in the dirt more times than not. So it'll be interesting to see Michael Williams and if he's in that more of like a pass rusher role this season.
Interesting. I like it. A-Day panic here, Matt Green. So I was looking through Alabama's 247 site and looking at their depth chart because like Milroe's numbers did not pop. He had a one big deep bomb and that was it. But I think he was like 3 for 9 overall. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't the smoothest afternoon for Alabama's offense in Tuscaloosa on Saturday. But I was looking at this. I mean, would you, if you're an Alabama fan right now, kind of be panicking when you compound Milroe's performance in the spring game along with the real lack of depth at wide receiver at Alabama this year?
What's the question?
So when you look at Alabama's depth and the depth of the wide receiver position, compounded with how Jalen Milroe performed at A-Day. So when you look at the depth chart coming out of that over there on 247, if you're an Alabama fan, are you panicking over this potential combination where I don't think this is
Nicely
one of the
done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.